I am going to be 25 this year, and I still live at home with my parents. I'm not moving out anytime soon. I'm
26 years old, and I live with my parents, and this is why I've given up on my dream to buy a house.
A record 25 million adults live with their parents, and roughly 70% of them ages 25 to 34 are employed full-time.
1 in 10 people aged between 30 and 34 are living with their parents still. This is quite fascinating.
For generations, growing up came with a simple expectation. Finish school, find a job, move into your own place, and begin building a life. But for millions of young Americans, that path is no longer within reach. Living with parents is no longer a temporary phase after graduation. It has become a financial necessity, even for people working full-time in stable careers. Behind every statistic is a person forced to delay independence, postpone major life decisions, and quietly watch the American dream drift further out of reach. So how did one of the world's wealthiest nations reach a point where adulthood itself has become unaffordable? And more importantly, what does this growing crisis reveal about the future of the American dream? In this documentary, we'll explore the economic forces behind this shift, hear from the people living through it, and uncover why a generation that was told to work hard is finding it harder than ever to build an independent life. If those stories sound surprising, they're no longer the exception. Across the United States, a quiet shift has been taking place. The idea that adulthood begins with moving into your own home is becoming increasingly difficult to achieve. For millions of young Americans, staying with their parents isn't a sign of failure. It's becoming a financial strategy for survival.
Well, living at home as a young adult is no longer taboo. It's new normal. A new study by Realtor.com reveals that a third of young people are still living with their parents. These are not strictly college students looking to save money on room and board. We're talking about a record 25 million people under 35, higher than at any time in history. Now, that includes more than 20% of 25 to 29-year-olds and more than 10% of 30 to 34-year-olds. These young people aren't just sitting around at home. About 70% of them are employed. But a lot of them say that they haven't left the nest because they can't afford one of their own. The median home price last year hit $430,000, up more than 34% before the pandemic. The median monthly rent has climbed nearly 18%, but not all of them are getting a free ride. Almost 3/4 of adult children living at home help pay for groceries or utilities, and nearly half say they help pay rent or the mortgage.
For decades, moving out was seen as a major milestone, a symbol of independence and the beginning of adult life. But today, that milestone is slipping further away. What's especially striking is that many of the people still living at home aren't unemployed or unwilling to work. They're nurses, teachers, office workers, skilled tradespeople, and young parents doing everything society told them to do, yet still struggling to afford a place of their own.
I'm 26 years old, and I live with my parents, and this is why I've given up on my dream to buy a house. I'm a 26-year-old registered nurse, single mom, and we've been living with my parents for the past 2 years. My parents have a studio apartment within their garage, and recently my sister moved out, making that place vacant, and for the longest time I was so reluctant about moving back in there because I actually lived there with my daughter when I was 21 years old, and I just have a lot of negative experiences and emotions connecting back to that studio apartment. I was 21, postpartum. I just became a single mom, and I moved from California to Arizona, so it was a lot of dramatic change in my life, and I feel like those negative experiences are attached to that apartment, and that's why I've been so reluctant to move back in there for the longest time. But now that I'm older and I feel like I've healed just a little bit, I feel like I'm ready to go back in, and that gives me everything that I wanted for my daughter and I, which is space and privacy. I posted a video not too long ago where I was basically asking you guys to help me out to decide if I should move back into that garage. At the end of the video, I questioned if that home should be a new temporary home for my daughter and I had a person comment, and she was like, temporary? Why don't you just stay there and DIY renovate and stay there until you have 100K reach? And I was like, you know what? Why wouldn't I? I'm gonna plan to stay there as long as I possibly can until my debt is gone, until I have invested a little bit of money, and until I have saved up enough money to buy a home. I know I did have a series of saving $50,000 in 2 years to buy a home, but that series unfortunately is going to be put to rest for now. It's not like I'm giving up on my dream to buy a home indefinitely. It's just delayed, and for how long it's going to be delayed, I really don't know.
Her story is deeply personal, but it's also becoming increasingly common. Delaying the dream of home ownership doesn't just postpone buying a house. It delays a sense of independence, stability, and the confidence that years of hard work will eventually pay off. And as young adults wrestle with that reality, many parents are watching from the sidelines, wondering whether their children will ever have the same opportunities they once did.
I need to have a vent session for a second about the state of affairs in this country. So I have 2 adult children. One is 18 going on 19 and the other one is 21. My 18-year-old is working currently as an HVAC apprentice and working on getting certified, but he's making $16 an hour, which I live in a small to mid-sized Missouri town, so that's pretty typical around here. Wages are, low compared to a lot of places, but so is the cost of living. But he would also not like to be living at home with mom forever. He's more of an independent, autonomous person, so apartment living is not for him at all. He wants a place where he can have his truck and his dirt bikes and be able to work on motors and have the freedom to do what he wants with the place and also be able to have all of his stuff. And at this point, honestly, renting a house would cost more than a mortgage payment anyway, but he's been looking for houses and just trying to figure out what he can afford and what he can do. And he found this place that was only $125,000, which is dirt cheap around here. That just doesn't exist anymore, but it had no basement. It was on a slab foundation, I think, and probably needed some work, which he is naturally talented at that stuff. He works in HVAC. He's very mechanically inclined. He can do this stuff. So he's not afraid of a fixer-upper. Found out that the main reason it was priced so cheap is because it was in a flood zone. So it was a no anyway. But keep in mind, $125,000 house in this economy. And when we looked up to see if he did a 5% down payment on this thing with, your insurance and PMI and taxes and everything, his payment would still be $1,100 a month for a cheap piece of crap house. And just the look of absolute dread on his face when he realized how completely unaffordable and unattainable it is for him to be able to buy a house and live on his own.
Taken together, these stories paint a picture that's difficult to ignore. This isn't about a lack of ambition or a generation refusing to grow up. It's about an economy that has changed faster than many people's ability to keep up. So what exactly has made something as ordinary as moving out feel out of reach for millions of hardworking Americans? To answer that, we need to look beyond the personal stories and examine the economic forces driving this new reality.
To understand why, we have to follow the money. Over the past few decades, the cost of building an independent life has risen at a pace that wages simply haven't matched. Buying a home, paying rent, covering everyday expenses, and saving for the future have all become significantly more difficult. For millions of young Americans, the financial equation no longer works, not because they're earning nothing, but because the cost of living keeps moving further out of reach.
Data shows that younger Americans will likely never be able to afford a home and will be forever renters. America is roughly 4 million homes short. Home prices have gone up 300% since 1990. Incomes have gone up less than half that amount. And since the start of the pandemic in 2020, U.S. home prices have soared nearly 50%. The median home price right now is around $405K to $416K. In places like California, cities like San Diego have an average home price of around $1 million. I can vouch for that. Rents have increased as much as 36% since the pandemic, yet our minimum wage hasn't gone up since 2009. This is really disappointing, and I'm not upset at the youth for feeling betrayed by the economy, by the elders before us, by everything really. And let's say the
average person does make about $2,500 a month, which is
that's rent. That's a one-bedroom apartment.
Because most one-bedrooms, and people keep saying, well, you just got to move neighborhoods. You may got to move into a different city. But now, even in hood, you still paying for an efficiency of one bedroom. That's $1,700.
Taken together, these figures reveal a pattern that's becoming impossible to ignore. For decades, the price of building an independent life has been rising far faster than the incomes meant to support it. Homes that were once considered affordable for middle-class families now cost several times what they did a generation ago. Rent has climbed so dramatically that in many cities, a full month's paycheck can disappear just to keep a roof over your head. And after paying for housing, millions of Americans still have to cover groceries, transportation, healthcare, utilities, insurance, childcare, and countless other everyday expenses that continue to become more expensive year after year. For many young adults, saving money has become less about discipline and more about survival. You can't save for a down payment when most of your income is already committed before the month even begins. Even those who budget carefully, avoid unnecessary spending, and work full-time often find themselves making little financial progress. It's not uncommon for someone to earn more than their parents did at the same age while actually having less purchasing power because the cost of living has increased so much faster. Student loans have added another layer of pressure for millions of graduates. Many begin adult life already carrying years of debt before they've even earned their first full-time paycheck. Others rely on credit cards simply to keep up with rising living costs, creating a cycle where paying off yesterday's expenses makes it even harder to prepare for tomorrow. What used to be stepping stones toward financial independence have, for many, become obstacles standing directly in the way of it.
The result is an economy where working hard no longer guarantees the stability it once promised. A generation that was encouraged to study, build careers, and play by the rules is discovering that following those rules doesn't always lead to the destination they were promised. That's why so many young adults aren't delaying independence because they lack ambition. They're delaying it because the financial mathematics simply don't work anymore. But perhaps the biggest impact of this crisis isn't measured in dollars or housing statistics. It's measured in the lives people are forced to postpone. When moving out becomes unaffordable, other milestones begin to move further away as well. Relationships are delayed. Marriage is postponed. Having children becomes a financial risk instead of a personal choice. Career decisions are influenced by housing costs rather than passion or opportunity. Entire life plans are quietly rewritten, not because people stopped dreaming, but because the price of those dreams keeps rising. And that's where this story becomes about far more than economics. It's about how an affordability crisis is reshaping an entire generation's expectations of adulthood. Because when millions of people are forced to put their future on hold, the effects don't stop at the front door of a family home. They ripple through communities, the economy, and society itself. To truly understand the cost of this crisis, we need to look beyond bank accounts and housing markets and examine what it's doing to people's lives, their relationships, and their future.
There aren't going to be many grandkids coming in. Bloodlines are going to be ending. Because if you can't afford to live for yourself, why would you have a baby? And the worst part is that the people who can't live for themselves are the people having babies. So we're fucked either way. So I think it's my due diligence to not have children. It's really depressing because I think it's every girl's dream to have like a baby. And now it's a nightmare because I can't afford to live for myself. I can't get a job. I can't afford a house. Apartments are literally so fucking expensive. Why would I have a baby? It's like we're literally going through the steps wrong. It's like, just have the baby, and just figure out, no. Your bloodline will end here.
So here's a question for all my Canadian friends. When did we all decide that working full-time and stressing about groceries, gas, and retirement was just normal? Like, when did we start normalizing this? And why are we accepting this? Because that's like what I keep hearing from people, friends, clients, strangers in my DMs here on TikTok. You know, they're all working hard. They're all doing everything right. They're budgeting, they're couponing, they're saving. You know, they're doing all the things. And somehow they're still super stressed. They're still worried, and they're still wondering, like, if they're ever going to get ahead, how they're going to get ahead. I don't remember this being the goal. And I refuse to believe this is how we're supposed to live. Am I the only one noticing this?
Here's your daily reminder that putting your head down and working your ass off until you're 65 so you can enjoy your, quote, golden years is a lie that was sold to you by the people who want you to keep your head down and work your ass off till you're 65 so they can exploit your labor.
Taken together, these stories reveal that the affordability crisis is no longer just an economic problem. It's becoming a deeply personal one. When people begin postponing marriage, delaying children, or questioning whether they'll ever achieve the life they imagined, the true cost can no longer be measured in dollars alone. For many young adults, adulthood itself now feels as though it's been placed on hold. Milestones that previous generations often expected to reach in their 20s or early 30s are becoming increasingly uncertain. Instead of planning for a first home or starting a family, many are simply trying to make it through another month without falling behind financially. That constant pressure comes with an emotional cost, living from paycheck to paycheck, worrying about rising expenses, and feeling as though hard work no longer guarantees progress can leave people frustrated, exhausted, and uncertain about the future. Over time, those feelings begin to shape not only financial decisions, but also confidence, relationships, and long-term goals. Yet despite these challenges, millions of people continue to work, adapt, and search for a better future. Their stories are not defined by a lack of ambition, but by an economy that has made independence increasingly difficult to achieve. Which raises one final question. If this has become the reality for so many people today, what happens next? Is this simply the new normal, or are there signs that the future could look different?
I gotta ask you, what is your hope for America at a time such as this?
My hope for America? My hope for America is what it's always been. I think it's the hope I hope we all share. We want it to continue to be the place where anyone from anywhere can achieve anything. Where you're not limited by the circumstances of your birth, by the color of your skin, by your ethnicity, but frankly, it's a place where you are able to overcome challenges and achieve your full potential. I think that should be the goal of every country in the world. But I think in the U.S., we're not perfect. Our history is not one of perfection, but it's still better than anybody else's history. Now, ours is a story of perpetual improvement. Each generation has left the next generation of Americans freer, more prosperous, safer, and that is our goal as well. And as we come upon this 250-year anniversary, I think we have a lot to learn and be proud of in our history. It is one of perpetual and continuous improvement, where each generation has done its part to bring us closer to fulfilling the vision that the founders of this country had upon its founding.
Perhaps that's the most important perspective of all. Every generation inherits its own challenges, but it also inherits the responsibility to solve them. Throughout American history, periods of hardship have often been followed by innovation, reform, and renewal. The challenges facing young adults today are serious, but they are not necessarily permanent. Housing affordability, wage growth, education costs, and the rising cost of living are not problems without solutions. Economists, policymakers, businesses, and communities continue to debate how these issues should be addressed. While there may be disagreement over the best path forward, there is growing recognition that the financial pressures facing younger generations cannot simply be ignored. The American dream has never been defined by the promise of an easy life. It has always been built on the belief that hard work should create genuine opportunity, and that each generation should have the chance to build a better future than the one before it. For many young Americans today, that promise feels more distant than it once did. But history reminds us that societies are capable of adapting when people are willing to confront difficult realities instead of pretending they don't exist. The question isn't whether young people still want to work hard. The stories we've heard throughout this documentary make it clear that they do. The real question is whether today's economic system still rewards that effort in the way previous generations expected. And until that question is answered, millions of families will continue making difficult decisions about where they live, when they marry, whether they have children, and what kind of future they can realistically hope to build.
Perhaps the American dream isn't disappearing. Perhaps it's being tested. And like every great test in history, what happens next will depend on the choices individuals, communities, businesses, and leaders make from this point forward.
Because at the end of the day, this story isn't just about housing. It isn't just about rent. It isn't just about inflation. It's about people. It's about families. And it's about whether the next generation will inherit a future filled with greater opportunity or greater uncertainty. What do you think? Has the American dream become harder to reach, or is it simply changing with the times? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this documentary, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to Global Reality Check, and join us as we continue exploring the economic and social realities shaping lives around the world. Thanks for watching.